Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. A strange, previously unknown state enveloped him. He felt every cell, every nerve, but his body remained motionless, as if it belonged to someone else. Scents hung in the air, sounds drifted from somewhere far away, but their meaning eluded him. The names of the objects emitting them simply wouldn't come to mind. His head was empty, an absolute terrifying void, as if the world he lived in had been erased without a trace. He couldn't remember anything, his name, the circumstances, or the place where he was. Only one thing was clear and certain: he was lying down. This single piece of knowledge pierced through the dense, impenetrable fog that shrouded his thoughts and feelings. Everything else was hidden behind this veil of oblivion. Gathering his strength, as if before a leap into the abyss, he tried to open his eyes. His eyelids fluttered, and through the pitch-black darkness, shimmering with colored dots, the first, barely perceptible glimmers of light broke through. They widened, merged, turning into two narrow, flickering slits, and then bright daylight flooded his eyes. At that very instant, an unbearable pain pierced his head, making him squeeze his eyes shut convulsively and silently pray for the saving darkness he had just so rashly abandoned. There, in the gloom, it was quiet and peaceful, but now chaotic. Insane pain tore through his brain. It had no rhythm, no measure. It was all-consuming and unbearable. He knew, absolutely knew, that this was the strongest pain he had ever had to endure. A muffled, desperate groan escaped his chest, and a moment later, he felt a touch. A damp, matted strand of hair lifted on its own, and something cool, soft settled on his forehead. This touch was incredibly pleasant and soothing. It instantly eased the pain, taking away some of its furious intensity, and the hammers and saws raging in his head began to lose their sharpness, retreat, disappear. His flared nostrils caught a subtle, barely discernible aroma, a blend of freshness, tartness, something sparkling and simultaneously long familiar and completely new. Then a life-giving moisture was felt on his lips, and liquid flowed down his dry, sore throat, bringing blessed relief. This was followed by a quick, light prick in his shoulder, like a mosquito bite. He mumbled gratefully, and a voice answered, thin as a silver bell, quiet as rustling grass, gentle as a kitten's purr. "Well, that's good, very good. Simply wonderful that you've woken up," it sounded above him. "I was starting to get worried. Now you need to rest, sleep. Hushabye, hushabye. Sleep and wake up. Well, almost healthy. Sleep." The wonderful sounds of the voice drifted away, fading, and the last thought that flashed through his mind was childishly naive. Could it be Mom is back? This effort deafened him with a final echo of pain, and he instantly plunged into saving silence and darkness. Thump, 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 thump. A quiet but persistent rhythm penetrated his sleep. Consciousness slowly gathered itself, recalling with horror how the previous attempt to open his eyes had ended. Finally, tensing up in anticipation of pain, he slightly opened one eye, listened to his sensations, and feeling no threat, fully opened his eyelids. He didn't flinch from the light, but from astonishment. Right at him, without blinking, stared a gnome with huge blue eyes. This was a real gnome, short, with a long gray beard and bushy eyebrows, wearing a huge red cap. The amazing creature lightly tapped the floor with a stick, and noticing his wide-open eyes, tilted its head, tugged at its beard, and quietly giggled. He closed his eyes, hoping the strange vision would dissipate, but it only got worse. Now, instead of one gnome, he saw two. The second was slightly taller, or perhaps his bright blue cap just seemed bigger. It's clear, I've gone mad. These are hallucinations, he thought, amazed by their strangeness and persistence. The delusions didn't disappear. On the contrary, they began to circle around him, making sounds like a very familiar tune. Attracted by this strange call, a third gnome in a bright yellow cap joined in. Yes, I've lost my mind, he thought with surprising calmness, watching the dance of multicolored caps. At least I'm going mad cheerfully, with songs and dances. I could have been delirious with terrifying spiders or skeletons, but these are such nice little fellows. And they sang wonderfully. What were they singing? Something very familiar, long forgotten, but something impossible to forget. Oh my God, it's A Little Fir Tree Was Born in the Forest, it dawned on him. With difficulty, a crooked smile, he moved his lips, involuntarily repeating the words of the children's song. All right, everyone, quickly scat, came a voice he immediately recognized. It was the same soft, silvery whispering timbre that had brought him peace last time. Now it held angry notes, clearly addressed to the mischievous gnomes. In response, there was a chorus of stubborn snuffling. Alex, don't you dare come into this room. The voice came from somewhere to the side, and he couldn't see the speaker at all, still afraid to turn his head. But this is our room. We have our things here. A hubbub arose. And I need to get under my bed. I need to. And did you see the markers? And I don't want to sleep next to Georgie anymore. You know what he does in his sleep? I'll tell you in your ear later. We'll sort it out later, came the reply. Now, everyone hold on to each other and form a train out there, beyond the door. Quickly! The gnomes obediently grabbed each other's clothes, and the one in front, with full responsibility, dragged the colorful train away. Having watched them go, he tiredly closed his eyes. It seemed he would have to learn to distinguish reality from visions, and at the same time accept that fairy tale creatures calmly hopped around, singing children's songs. How are you doing? Came the voice above him, and he again felt the subtle, slightly tart aroma of freshness. Oh yes, you're doing very well. You can look right here, at the tip of my finger. All right, good. Now I'll move it. Don't take your eyes off my finger. Good. Right, a little more, a little more. Look at the finger. Why can't you? He really couldn't take his eyes off it, but not because they wouldn't obey. He simply didn't want to take his eyes off the face leaning over him. A fairy? A mermaid? Who is this? What an amazing creature is standing so close that he can see the thin bluish vein on her temple. A vein? Does that mean she's human? No, it can't be. There are no such creatures among humans. Humans. They are rougher, denser, heavier, louder. Their skin is thick, covered in hair. Their faces are bright, fleeting, and they constantly show their teeth in unnecessary smiles. However, she could well be a representative of any fairy tale folk, since she had just ushered out a whole crowd of gnomes. So why shouldn't she herself be a dryad or a sylph? He had already resigned himself to being in some strange, frozen world. Her face, as if drawn with delicate calligraphic strokes. High, sharp cheekbones, almost straight eyebrows sweeping towards her temples, a small nose, gently outlined lips, pale, matte translucent skin. Everything about this face was inexpressibly fine, elegant, light. It seemed woven from mist, from haze, and if you blew on it, it would melt, disappear, like fantastic figures in the clouds. She was not a beauty whose image is etched in memory forever. And yet, it was impossible to forget her. just as it is impossible to forget a sunset or cherry blossoms, and impossible to hold her close, like the scent of a flower or a fading ray. But there was something in this face that firmly held him to the ground, prevented him from carelessly disappearing. Her eyes. Huge, gray-blue. Although he wouldn't vouch for their color, this amazing creature seemed able to change them at will. And so it was. Just a moment ago they were gray with a blue tint, and a moment later they darkened, becoming the color of dark pearls. Probably because their owner frowned in puzzlement. But apparently the worry was unfounded. Her forehead smoothed, her lips twitched in a slight smile, and now her eyes shone with warm, joyful blue aquamarines. Her eyes were incredibly expressive. They showed now anxiety, now a sly smirk, now quiet sadness. They laughed and cried, rejoiced and grieved, joked and questioned. And for all this, their owner didn't need to open her mouth, utter words, shed tears, frown, or smile, like other people. He tore himself away from her face with difficulty and stared at the tip of her thin finger with a short, oval nail. "Can you hear me? Hello?" She leaned over him, looking intently into his eyes. This made him catch his breath. His throat felt tight. "Look at me. That's it. Good. And now again. Look right. Now left. Good. Well then. Seems like not." She mumbled something in her elvish, or human. Pupils are calm, temperature is normal, no nausea, eye movement is painless. Let's assume we got off with a slight scare. "Yes!" He nodded joyfully. Not understanding a word of what she said, he would have agreed to anything now, just for her to stay close. It suddenly became completely unimportant where he was, what was wrong with him, even who he was, and why he couldn't remember. If all this was the price for meeting those incredible eyes, that elusive light smile, slightly unsettling pale lips, those hands smelling of greenery, lemon and rain, well, he was gladly willing to pay such a price. And then the fairy surprised him. Her hands turned out to be strong, nimble, not at all ethereal. She unexpectedly lifted him by the shoulders and shoved a pillow under them. "Well, now you need to eat," she said. After these words, so simple and earthly, he finally came to his senses. Until that second, he had been as if in a trance, enchanted, helplessly watching the changing wonders. The hypnosis ended, and immediately his head, ribs, leg, and for some reason, the bandaged fingers on his right hand began to ache, throb, and twitch. And his stomach rumbled, so loudly that she listened in surprise and nodded understandingly. A few minutes later, he was enjoying, burning his tongue, sipping amber chicken broth speckled with fragrant herbs from a large mug, probably some kind of magical potion. Then there was another light and quick prick in his shoulder, after which the pain, which had been trying to snatch the mug of broth from him, began to quickly subside. "Well, that's good. Now you need to rest, and then we'll talk," she said, her eyes shining cheerfully. It seemed his appetite, which little could affect, pleased her. She helped him lie back on the bed and, dimming the fragile winter day, drew the curtain. Although it seemed to him that she did it with some kind of magical gesture. "Tell me." He raised himself slightly, fighting the rapidly encroaching sleepy haze. "The gnomes? Were the gnomes really gnomes?" She turned around and laughed, as if scattering silver bells. "Yes, the gnomes were real." "Good," he whispered to himself. So everything else was also real. So she herself was also real. With this comforting thought, he fell asleep. His third awakening was simpler, much more pleasant than the previous two. He lifted his eyelids without even remembering the fear of pain, and immediately his eyes darted to find his fairy, as he mentally called this astonishing creature. The anxious enchantment remained, because he still understood nothing, and yet for some reason didn't want to start understanding. He felt suspended between his past reality and a new, unknown one. And frankly, he didn't want to go back. Perhaps she felt he was awake, and she appeared. Yes, she didn't enter, but appeared, as if woven from air. "Good morning, afternoon, evening," she said, looking intently into his eyes. "An excellent sleep, you could even say outstanding." She pulled up a chair and sat down. "Well, let's talk." She tilted her head. "Do you remember anything?" "Of course, everything," he nodded. "You, the broth, the gnomes, all three of them, red, blue, and yellow, and you." "And that's all?" she asked again. "And that's all," he nodded cautiously. How could he explain to her that for some reason he didn't want to remember anything else when he had her face, the scent of freshness from her thin hands, and the funny song about the fir tree? "Well, all right, let's start with the simplest thing." She was relentless. "What's your name?" "My name?" He was surprised. It turned out he had managed to forget that every person must have a name. "My name is... Something was on the tip of my tongue. And it's gone. I don't remember." He shrugged apologetically. "I don't know." "Well, that's a problem. And I don't know either," she sighed. "You see, you didn't have anything on you. No documents, no phone, no card. Just nothing that could help understand who you are, where you came from. Maybe you remember a name, an address, a phone number? Anything at all?" "No. From the looks of it, you have amnesia. Temporary, let's hope. Don't be scared." She looked at him doubtfully, obviously seeing no hint of fear on his face. "It happens, and quite often with head injuries, concussions. You need to rest well and try to remember yourself." "How did I end up here? With you?" he asked, although he really wanted to say, "with you." "Listen," she smiled. "It feels a bit awkward, us using formal you like in an interview. Let's switch to informal you, all right? Hey, what's wrong? Are you feeling bad? Dizzy?" She looked anxiously at his tense face. "Yes, something's wrong. Or rather, about to be." Oh, the horror. How to confess the most earthly, prosaic need to a magical fairy. What on earth should he do now? He looked at her with a shy plea. "Ah, I understand," she nodded calmly. "Well, get up, let's go. You're not as unable to walk as you might think. By the way, then it's even more important for us to switch to informal you quickly. Such matters are easier to resolve between good comrades, aren't they?" He didn't even notice how, to the sound of her silver voice, he found himself awkwardly standing on his feet, favoring his bandaged limb. "Just a bad sprain," she explained, following his gaze. With a quick, fluid movement, she slipped under his arm. So they hobbled to a place that, to his surprise, existed not only in the houses of mere mortals, but also in the dwellings of fairies. There, he looked at his reflection and recoiled in fright. A gaunt man with dull eyes, a scrape on his forehead covered by tangled hair, and a considerable 3-day stubble stared back from a cracked mirror. "Aha, looking good." His hostess nodded cheerfully. "But I must admit, it somehow suits you. We even gave you a nickname, the Noble Night Robber. The boys think you fought bravely but couldn't stand against 100,000 enemies. Well, don't worry. You'll get stronger soon. I'll give you a razor, a comb, and you'll be clean-shaven, decent, and boring again." He really wanted to ask who we were, what boys she was talking about, and why being clean-shaven was boring, but he didn't dare. "Well," she said when he was back on the bed. "So, you don't remember anything? Well, then I'll tell you what I know. Maybe some memories will surface. Something will suddenly come to mind." "All right. By the way, my name is Victoria. Vicky. This is my apartment, so you can stay here as long as you need, completely at ease. So, the fairy tale fairy, the enchanted creature, had turned into a perfectly real young woman named Victoria. But his involuntary inner tremor at the sound of her voice, the scent of her hands and hair, the look in her eyes, that hadn't disappeared, but only joyfully strengthened at the thought that all this belonged to someone who wouldn't vanish or deceive him. Half an hour later, he was thoughtfully twirling the edge of a fluffy blanket, going over everything Victoria had told him. She had found him late in the evening on the street, near her house, lying in a snowdrift, in just a shirt and jeans, beaten, unconscious. Asking a passerby for help, she had dragged him to the emergency room. There they were asked to leave. He had no documents. And yet, at her requests, demands, pleas, and threats, he was brought to consciousness. His head and leg were bandaged, and his fingers were wrapped. To a clinic? I don't have one. Sorry, so I brought you to my place, put you to bed. Well, and then you know, she finished simply. But don't worry, I'm not a doctor, but at least I can provide first aid and proper care. After all, I have 5 years of medical school behind me. She sighed lightly, thought about something, but then, as if catching herself, smiled easily and brightly. You'll rest for a couple of days, maybe you'll remember something. And anyway, you need to get better quickly, because New Year is in a week. Something twitched, slightly turned in his head, but immediately quieted down again. Understood. So, you live here alone? He asked cautiously, still unaccustomed to using informal you, and posed a very important question for him. What if everything collapsed now? What if his fairy had a legitimate fairy spouse? Maybe he was just on a business trip or out running errands. Well, why alone? She chuckled, and his heart ached with longing. Completely alone. Although, to be honest, sometimes I really dream of being alone, even if just for a little while. You've already seen my company. That's how we live, the 4 of us. With the gnomes. You live with gnomes? He asked, stunned. With 3 of them? He clarified. For some reason, the funny ambiguity of his question hung in the air, and suddenly Vicky shook quietly with laughter. He looked at her in surprise, smiled uncertainly, giggled, clutching his aching ribs, wincing and groaning, and burst out laughing himself. Aha! That's the kind of Snow White I am, though slightly shortchanged by fate. Vicky laughed, finally turning into a charming, earthly woman. I only have 3 gnomes, not enough for a full set. Calming down, wiping away the tears brought on by laughter, Vicky floored him with an incredible fact that didn't fit her at all. It turned out that the gnomes were, of course, not fairy tale creatures at all, but children, little ones. Twins Georgie and Alex, aged 5, and Vic, who was the same age. And when he first saw them, they were trying on costumes prepared for the New Year's party at kindergarten. That's how his delusion was amusingly dispelled. Wait, I don't understand. If Georgie and Alex are twins, and Vic is their age, they should be triplets, shouldn't they? He tried to understand why the news that Victoria had 3 children didn't shock him at all. Perhaps because everything about her had to be unusual, not like other women. Even if she was earthly, and had a wonderful but quite ordinary name, and had even once studied at university, like mere mortals. But she was still a miracle, extraordinary and incredible. She had 3 little ones. Well, that too was a miracle. Well, why necessarily triplets? Vicky smiled. Not necessarily. There's a riddle for you. Lie there and ponder. Very useful in your condition. So, we've done the bandages. You've slurped the soup. I've given the injection. Now sleep. He hastily caught her thin hand, still smelling of the same melody of greenery, coolness, and freshness and pressed it to his lips. And he sighed in astonishment. The palm, which he thought he held firmly with his bandaged fingers, literally dissolved, disappeared, leaving a slight coolness and sweet bitterness on his lips. He mumbled with pleasure and, as he had become accustomed to, fell into silence and darkness. One bright, calm day followed another. His leg ached with a sprained tendon, his ribs complained of bruises, and one of his fingers was swollen, resembling a sausage. And yet, he had never felt so good. He couldn't explain this feeling. He lived in a small apartment, tried to help the constantly busy, appearing and disappearing Vicky, and remembered children's games. The kids were wonderful, healthy, slyly intelligent, without a drop of what is usually used to stigmatize children from poor and single-parent families. They were more than adequately provided with everything necessary: love, affection, care, and tenderness. And all this was generously seasoned with songs, fairy tales, pancakes, games of hide-and-seek, rosy apples, and space rockets made of chairs. The twins, Alex and Georgie, were charming blonde rascals, always plotting something. They constantly played tricks on everyone by the fact that no one but their mother could tell them apart. Vic, dark-haired, brown-eyed, slightly taller than his brothers, was completely different, having clearly inherited his appearance from some very distant ancestor. And his character was completely different too, serious and calm. Perhaps this was somehow explained by the eerie scar that split the boy's upper lip in two, making him seem to lisp when he spoke. Vicky called him Bunny. However, as soon as the boy entered the orbit of his brothers, not a trace of his thoughtfulness and seriousness remained, and 3 voices and 6 limbs united for common achievements. And suddenly, he began to remember. The second day of their life together was ending. The little ones were engaged in their usual cheerful romp on the floor, but after a while, one of the twins slightly detached himself from the tangle of arms, legs, and heads, and seized by an unexpected creative impulse, began to sing. "Andy, Andy, let's go dig potatoes. Andy, Andy, let's go dig potatoes." His comrades readily, willingly, and immediately supported him. Vicky laughed, and he twitched and lunged forward, but got tangled in the blanket and almost fell off the bed. "Potatoes. Andy. I remember. My name is... Potatoes. That is, Andy. Andrew. I'm Andrew." "Well, hello, Andrew. Nice to meet you." She smiled, and her eyes shining, now bright blue like the sea under the sun, shook his hand. "Well then, Andrew," she said his name with pleasure. "The first step is taken. Now everything should go faster. And you know, you probably need to go to the police. After all, they must be looking for you, worrying." Although she involuntarily looked at his washed but frankly worn jeans and shirt with a frayed collar. "Yes, I understand. I've become a nuisance to you. To you. I'm sitting here, eating you out of house and home. You're spending money on food, medicine, time, energy, and generally, yes, I should leave. I understand everything, but I don't want to leave." The words burst out of him unexpectedly and surprised him no less than Victoria. "Well, if you think so, of course you can stay with us a couple more days, get stronger. Frankly, I'll be happy if you stay for a few days. We've got runny noses, as always, all 3 of them together. They won't let us into kindergarten, and I can't sit with them right now. Lots of work, and New Year is just around the corner. It's just awful." And as if on purpose, Mrs. Martha, our neighbor from the apartment opposite, is sick. Usually she helps me in such cases. So if you stay with the kids, you'll be a big help to me. Oh my God, finally he could be useful to her in some way. He suddenly wanted to fall to his knees, kiss Vicky's hands, and thank her for the honor of helping her. Frankly, he didn't understand how she managed everything. Early in the morning she would run off somewhere. By lunchtime, she would bring back a pile of colored paper, frames, folders, and, humming something under her breath, would cut and glue with enthusiasm. Then she would easily ladle soup in the kitchen, splash water in the bathroom, gather her mysterious crafts, and run off again. In the evening, the apartment would fill with the boys, shrieking, banging, dirty sneakers and t-shirts, drawings, chomping, songs, arguments, and sometimes desperate roaring. Finally, everything would quiet down, and Vicky would disappear, like the last ray of sun, sometimes for the whole night, only to reappear at home as unnoticed as the first morning light. But the clothes, washed at some unknown time, would be neatly folded. The pots would be fragrant with rich soups, porridges, and stews. Everything would be in its place, and the boys would magically become clean and combed. How did she manage it? A mystery. Perhaps it was one of her magical secrets. Victoria was reluctant to tell him about her life. Or rather, she said nothing at all, just smiling. So there was no doubt about the futility of such stories. Why talk about the past? Isn't it obvious that here and now she is absolutely serenely happy? That she is completely content with life, enjoys every day of it, and only dreams that, God forbid, nothing should change? The only thing was that much of what surrounded her somehow didn't fit the concept of absolute happiness. However, how could he judge what this amazing woman truly needed? Maybe she really was happy. Frozen fingers, the absence of a winter-down jacket, the threatening sole of her boot that she was gluing, thinking no one saw her. These were certainly not reasons to give up a cheerful walk with the boys. And what did faded wallpaper, a rattling old refrigerator, and the fact that only one burner on the stove worked properly matter? So what? Did all this interfere with the unrestrained fun that reigned in the house? Or did the dishes become less tasty because of it? No, quite the contrary. It was so fun and great to draw on the faded wallpaper all together, and no one else had such pictures on their walls. And perhaps it didn't matter at all that light, but noticeable shadows had permanently settled under her amazing eyes, and her small collarbones stretched the thin light skin so that it often looked as if it was about to tear. Well, perhaps that's how they were supposed to be, translucent, weightless. But really, where have you seen a fairy with rosy cheeks and extra weight? Realizing that he wouldn't get anything out of Vicky anyway, Andrew looked more closely at everything that surrounded her and at the people living nearby. The house was small, 2-story, with a single entrance, very old, with a wide, creaky staircase. There were 4 apartments, and everyone knew everything about everyone else, and a little more besides. The house was sick, celebrated, grieved, was indignant, and rejoiced. In short, it lived. And Victoria was its brave little heart. Andrew was convinced of this very soon. Holding onto the railing, the man was already quite skillfully hopping on his 1.5 legs, accompanying the gang of boys outside. "There they are!" shouted the neighbor from the ground floor, Barbara, whom everyone called Old Mrs. Barbara behind her back, almost trampling them. She was known for her quarrelsome, suspicious nature, was routinely in irreconcilable conflict with one of the neighbors, and, of course, was extremely displeased with the bunch of constantly chattering boys who left trails of footprints on the clean floor of the stairwell, as well as balls, candy wrappers, stray cats, mittens, scoops, and God knows what else from the kids' senseless arsenal. "Excuse me, I forgot to give instructions before going out." Andrew laughed, hobbling over to the woman standing in the pose of an avenging fury. "You could hit them over the head with a stick. They wouldn't notice," she grumbled. "They're blockheads, one and all. The first, the second, and the third." "Why do you say that? Why?" Andrew shook his head. "They are wonderful kids, and so friendly." It's strange that only Vic looks nothing like Vicky or his brothers. Not a bit. And for some reason he says he was born on June 10th, and the boys on the 25th. Well, he's not Vicky's, and he's no brother to the twins, the neighbor replied. Meaning he's not related to them. That soft-hearted fool took him from the maternity hospital along with her own. 2, of course, wouldn't be enough, but 3 is just right. He's a foundling. She looked angrily at Andrew's puzzled face. Don't you understand? Well, they abandoned him at the maternity hospital. His own mother abandoned him. He was born like that, a freak, with a hair lip. And everyone wants perfect babies, angels, as if they're going to live in paradise later. The woman smiled bitterly and maliciously. Well, and so she dragged 3 home, like a cat, honestly. Sometimes she doesn't have enough to feed her own, and she's put someone else's around her neck. The years of bitterness that had permeated Barbara were now clearly struggling with something bright and pure. And suddenly, kindness won. The woman smiled, and her usual mask of grimness and suspicion seemed to fall from her face. Although, of course, Vicky saved Vic. Where would he go like that? No one else would have taken him. Straight to the baby home, and then to the orphanage. And there, can you imagine what would have happened to him? Like that, there? They would have worn the boy out, that's all. And suddenly, as if realizing something, she grimaced. Her life will begin with this. Well, not life, but hard labor. Now she's working herself to the bone at 3 jobs. Soon there'll be nothing left of her. And we women are all fools. That's how we live, for who knows whom, giving ourselves completely, and then we're left with nothing. You toil like a camel without rest, then you stand in the kitchen, then you sleep almost standing up, like a war horse. She looked at Andrew, who had already started descending towards the exit of the stairwell. No time to think about yourself, to go to the hairdresser for a massage. Just one day in life to live only for yourself, like a real woman. I'm a woman too, by the way. And tell Vicky, if she's really going to decorate the tree in the yard, she can clean up the mess herself afterwards. Barbara's shouts were audible even after the stairwell door closed behind him. Ah, so that's who Mrs. Martha has been these days. Andrew heard another woman's voice behind him, but completely different. Quiet, calm, slightly shaky. Just in case, he quickly counted the boys bustling in the snowdrift and turned around. Behind him stood a short, slightly stooped old woman in a funny fur hat. Are you Andrew? Vicky told me about you. She smiled with an incredibly warm, kind smile. The kind only grandmothers who make no distinction between their own and other people's grandchildren can. She found you, did she? And now she's nursing you back to health? Not surprising. That's just how she is. Always has been. Rushes to everyone's aid. It doesn't matter who's in front of her. A child, a sparrow, a man, a kitten, an old woman. Just don't tell little Vicky that you saw me outside, she asked, smiling. She'll scold me for going out. She ran to me this morning on her way to work, took my blood pressure, brought me pills, ordered me to lie down and not get up. But I dragged myself out. I really need to go to the post office, send gifts to my grandchildren. My grandchildren are far away. My son Steven works there. I want to see my Stevie and the girls so much. I just can't stand it. She sighed and dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. No, I don't blame Steven. She excused her son, unknown to Andrew. Where would he find the time? It's flying halfway across the country. They are busy people, both he and his wife. They don't forget me, don't you think? They call me often, they worry too. They always promise, we'll come, we'll definitely come. But when? No, I understand everything. I'm just very afraid, because I might die any day now and won't see them. She again wiped her eyes with the handkerchief, raised her bright, clear eyes to Andrew, the kind only children and old people have, and smiled shyly. Oh, Andy, forgive me. I've talked your ear off. She laughed a small, quiet laugh. You just reminded me of my Stevie. Well, it was nice meeting you. Just remember. Saying goodbye, she walked away, carefully pressing the package with gifts for her granddaughters to herself. And he, who hadn't said a word to her, watched her go for a long time, unusually yearning with someone else's separation. The boys, having had their fill of playing, tumbled into the stairwell in a noisy crowd, covered from head to toe in soft balls of snow. Andrew, unable to keep up, hobbled behind. A leather glove lay on the first-floor landing. He drops them all the time, one of the boys reported authoritatively from above. He lives in the second apartment. Andrew rang the doorbell, and a few seconds later, a thin woman with a tired face and dull eyes opened the door. Ah, David? Andrew stammered, fiddling with the glove in his hand. The woman gestured towards the room. A man sat on an old sofa, broad-shouldered with regular features, black wavy hair. Even if he were very attractive, even being 100% man who preferred to admire female beauty, Andrew couldn't help but admit the man sitting before him was very handsome. He was out of place and time here, among the faded wallpaper, old furniture, and dusty, stale air. He should be shining with intelligent eyes on a movie screen, be a physical education coach. But the man couldn't do any of that. Not stand, not run, not jump. Nothing. Because his legs, helpless, unnaturally thin and deathly still, weighing nothing, chained him to the cracked, long, unpainted floor more securely than multi-ton shackles. He raised his head and smiled. Again? He said. No, really. I'll ask Mom to sew on an elastic band. I walk, but figuratively speaking. That is, I ride. I used to ride. What about a wheelchair? Andrew asked cautiously. It's called a wheelchair, the man said without self-pity, and with a familiar, ingrained, and therefore calm pain. Even without a leg, I still enjoy privileges. I can sit in my chair even in the presence of the head of state. However bitter he felt, he couldn't help but smile and laugh. Vicky came up with that for me, it helps. And generally, if it weren't for her, I might have already. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And I do have a chair, yes, it's over there. David gestured towards where a pile of iron on wheels was piled up. My old one, it's been repaired 10 times, and it's useless. It keeps breaking. And buying a new one is very expensive, and you have to wait for a free one. So I sit and wait like a miracle from Father Frost. The words of the handsome young man, sitting helplessly trapped within 4 walls, carried such hopelessness that Andrew lowered his eyes. And when he raised them again, he blinked in surprise. A painting hung on the wall. At first, Andrew took it for a painted city landscape, a narrow street between old houses, a wet pavement reflecting the yellowish light of lanterns, and a single thin human figure. And suddenly, Andrew straightened up and looked closer. The painting seemed to come alive, to stir. He even thought the little figure took a small step forward. Was he having hallucinations again? He looked back at David in panic. David nodded and smiled. Andrew walked closer and gasped. The painting was 3-dimensional. The houses seemed to protrude from the frame, like real ones, and it seemed that lights would soon come on in the windows. A tram would turn the corner. Look, the tracks gleamed between the houses, and the figure would jump in place and hurry about its business. Scientifically, it's called paper toll, a technique for creating 3-dimensional paintings, David explained to the astonished Andrew. And simply put, it's called Vicky's Little Miracle. It's her painting. She gave it to me a long time ago. I just look at this street, and sometimes it seems to me that I myself am walking along it, breathing the air after the rain, afraid of getting hit by a tram. My God, what happiness it is to be afraid of getting hit by a tram. How can that be? You've been staying at her place for several days and haven't seen any of her paintings? Although, yes, she doesn't keep them at home, as she once said. She's afraid of falling into self-admiration. How can she have nothing to leave? She just makes them and sells them right away. She needs the money, for the boys, for all this charity of hers. And she also works shifts at the hospital, washes dishes in a restaurant. And I just sit. David pulled the pathetic remnants of his legs towards him and smiled. Can you imagine, she told me once. Davy, I calculated that to buy you a new chair, I only need to make 86 paintings. I've already made 10, the rest is a trifle. Isn't she a fool? A few hours ago, Andrew had already heard Vicky called a fool. But then the shrill female voice boiled with misunderstanding and bitterness, so the word was poisonous. Now the disabled young man said it softly, affectionately, carefully, and it sounded like a tender, touching confession. Are you leaving soon? Brown-eyed Vic looked at Andrew seriously, intently. Tired of me, huh? The man nodded playfully at the boy. Getting in your way here. Yesterday I accidentally ate Georgie's apple. It's just, I really love apples. I've always eaten several since childhood, even with the core. Andrew froze. Something inside his head powerfully surged, jumped, like a fish thrown onto the shore trying to get back to where everything is familiar and understandable. But losing strength, it quieted down again. That wasn't Georgie's apple. It was mine. Actually, he ate his right away. What does that matter? He heard Vic's voice and looked at the boy bunny in confusion. I'll give you all of mine. The twins will too. Just don't leave us. At least not until New Year. Why? Andrew was amazed. I'm no use at all. It's just that Mom doesn't cry anymore, little Vic explained patiently and somewhat frighteningly because of the seriousness in his eyes. Ever since you came to us, she hasn't cried once. She thinks I don't see, and nobody sees. But I see. And on New Year's, nobody should cry. Everyone should be happy. Like us. Like me. Vic said the last words with conviction. The little boy, born to be deprived, held his head high and boasted of something he couldn't possibly have by definition. Happiness. Vicky. Andrew looked at her. That smell. So fresh. What is that smell? That? She was surprised. Oh, that's verbena. Always loved it. And it scares the boys away, like mosquitoes. If I use a little too much, they start sneezing and leave me alone. Andrew, what's wrong? He swayed, closed his eyes and clutched his head. It started humming. Verbena. Of course! The freshness of wet leaves and citrus. That's the smell of verbena. Mom, this is my gift, son. These are my favorites. Andrew, we're breaking the contract. Deal with this immediately and personally. You're something else, Miller. 18,000 euros for a week's vacation. Only you could do that. And the reports will be there. That's what's expensive. I need to change my car. Or rather, you need to change my car. Andy, stop eating apples with cores and stems. What is this, really? You'll have stomach problems. USA? That restaurant? You'll buy it off? Oh, let's go to the one where we had such a blast with those. Well, Mr. Miller, one call from you, and our delivery is secured. Oh, Andy, you finally got those watches with diamonds. How much did you pay? How much? $500,000? Well, actually, that's all right. How can you live in this apartment? The split system here is useless. Miller, do you remember? The day after tomorrow, the whole gang is flying to the Champions League final. 5 boxes booked. Phrases, whole and fragmented, voices, the roar of engines, the shouts of the crowd, the whisper of a computer, the roar of a racing car, the melody of a mobile phone, the clinking of silverware, the sounds of airport announcements. All this crashed down on Andrew like a mountain avalanche. Memories rushed through his head chaotically, as if trying to quickly find and occupy the places they had lost a few days ago. "I remember," he exhaled. "I remember. I'm Andrew Miller. I'm 34 years old. I live downtown." "I'm so happy for you." Her eyes shone. "So happy. It's so great to remember yourself. You're like a gift to yourself for the new year." She laughed. "So, you have somewhere and someone to go back to?" He nodded. "Wonderful." A light shadow fell on her face and disappeared faster than he could blink. "Simply wonderful. Well then, goodbye. We'll miss you. And please don't forget anything else." She touched his cheek more with a breath, a scent, warmth, than with her lips, and disappeared, as dreams are supposed to. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth. That was about him, about Andrew Miller. The boy, the only son of a very wealthy businessman, grew up, of course, in complete comfort, provided with everything imaginable, especially after losing his mother early. Andrew received an excellent education, polished to a blinding shine, and the position of future heir to a large firm. Along with this, he received a destiny, prearranged down to the smallest detail, from which it was almost impossible to escape. However, the path was comfortable, luxurious, and the object of constant envy from others. When Andrew turned 30, his father completely handed over the affairs of the large company to him. And along with this, he inherited the duties of the life of the party among a group of wealthy young businessmen, convinced that everything is for sale and purchase. The only question is the price. They sold and bought cars, companies, honor, clothes, foreign resorts, women, health, conscience, restaurants. Only Andrew suddenly began to notice that with the years, the price kept rising, and what was bought kept getting worse. Life began to serve up outright garbage, from which his head ached with melancholy, and his heart grew indifferently cold. And then, at the very end of the year, there was a half-joking bet. "When was the last time you worked so that you weren't just tapping on a laptop, shouting into a phone, or bossing secretaries around, but really, with your hands? What can you even do? Take away your credit cards, your supercars, and you'll starve to death in a week," one of them started. "I still remember your screams on the plane that people with illnesses should fly on separate flights. When was that? And anyway, that's not what we're talking about. I can easily live without money. Want to bet?" Andrew held out his hand. "Bet!" his friend exclaimed. "My driver's parents are just moving out of an old communal apartment. There's your place to live. Just remember, you give up everything. Your watch, your ring, your 100 grand sneakers, all your credit cards, your phones, and we'll monitor your accounts." "You won't pull out my porcelain teeth," Andrew grumbled. "Wish I could," his friend laughed. "All right, you convinced me. Until Christmas. On our Christmas trip. Deal?" They shook hands in front of a large crowd of cheerful witnesses. That's how Andrew Miller ended up on the outskirts, more like a slum than a city district, in an old half-empty apartment with leaking pipes. He honestly lasted 2 days, on his subcutaneous fat, so to speak, and then, to get food, he almost got into a fight with stray dogs he encountered. He managed to get a job unloading a huge truck full of groceries. Dragging off another crate, he slipped on a banana peel discarded by someone's shoe. He felt quick, rough fingers searching his pockets and pulling off his not-so-great jacket from his shoulders. And then there was cold, darkness, and silence, pain and fear. The smell of verbena, the song about the little fir tree that was cold in winter, and an adventure the length of a small life. Gnomes and a handsome disabled man, a poor little apartment, a masterpiece made of paper on the wall, a lonely old woman, and the most delicious chicken broth in the world. But most importantly, huge shining eyes, a silver voice, and thin, strong hands with protruding bones. All this couldn't be bought with money. Or could it? He arrived at the familiar house and immediately saw Vicky. She was decorating a large, fluffy fir tree standing in the middle of the yard. "Andrew!" she exclaimed, her gaze sweeping over the huge black SUV, the perfectly fitting coat on the man, the shiny shoes, and she smiled. "I see you really had something to remember." "Yes, well," he said, not knowing what to do with his hands, his eyes, or his whole self from the acute feeling that he was completely out of place here. How could this be? It had been so good just recently. They smiled at him. They loved him. Poor, sick, remembering nothing, he had belonged here and had been happy. And now? What now? Vicky seemed to guess his thoughts and asked, "And what now?" "I wanted to... Thank you." He pulled a plastic card from his pocket. "What is this?" her eyes asked. He had never seen that look in her eyes before, and he had thought he had already studied all the shades of her eyes. Now they were gray steel, and he stammered, "Vicky, well, this is... money. For you, for the boys, for repairs, clothes. No, don't think. There's a lot, really a lot. You need money, I know you do." "I do," she nodded, and the silver notes disappeared from her voice too. "But not like this, and not from you." "Well, Vicky, let's not... You did spend on me. I ate and drank at your place for almost a week. What else did I do?" "Is this for help?" she repeated thoughtfully. "Well, thank you, of course. But I don't take money for help. Or for friendship. Or for... In short, I don't need anything from you." She shook her head and added with a smile, "Imagine, we thought you were a noble robber, but you're just a rich shopkeeper. We were wrong. I was wrong. Again. And it's a pity." He sat in negotiations, observing the people detachedly. Opening? Just help? He loved her. Can you hurt someone you love? Or can you? What had he done? Of course he had hurt her, insulted her. Because feelings, real feelings, cannot be bought. They can only be received as a gift. How simple. Why had he forgotten this so quickly? How had he forgotten the disabled man trapped within walls, old Mrs. Martha, and the thin hands smelling of his mother's perfume? "Idiot! Cretin! Moneybag!" Andrew suddenly exclaimed. "You know, Mr. Miller," the astonished interlocutor said, half rising, "perhaps our terms are not the most suitable for you, but I would still ask you..." "What are you talking about, forgive me?" Andrew laughed. "I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about myself. I'm leaving now. My deputy will sign everything. And I don't have time. Forgive me. I have to run. I have so much to do. After all, tomorrow is New Year. It's time for dreams to come true." On December 31st, he patiently watched Vicky and her old neighbor untangling garlands with 4 hands. "Oh, wait, Andrew! What are you doing? You're getting in my way. Oh, I broke a light bulb on the garland because of you. And we have a gathering by the tree this evening. Mrs. Martha, don't dress the boys too warmly, okay? It's warm outside." "Mrs. Martha won't be able to come to the tree. A car is coming for her in an hour," Andrew suddenly said. "What?" the women asked in unison and looked at him in astonishment. Yes. Get ready, Mrs. Martha. They'll come for you, take you to the airport, and you'll fly to your son and his family to celebrate New Year. Your granddaughters are very much waiting for you, making you presents. I called your son. He even dropped his phone from happiness. He'll meet you." "But how?" The old woman was flustered. "Andy, I won't make it. I'll die." "You won't die." Andrew nodded resolutely. "It's a private jet. There will be a doctor with the necessary equipment with you constantly, to help you in case anything happens." "I'm flying." The old woman nodded decisively and even stamped her foot. "No, not yet," Andrew thought. "He hasn't earned it yet. I need to visit your neighbor from the first floor, too. David. Andrew, limping, shuffled into the apartment, pushing a light but sturdy wheelchair before him, which looked more like a modern, stylish mini-car for one. This, of course, won't replace your legs, but you know, it's an amazing thing. Maneuverable, light. To be honest, I rode in it myself for half a day. Everything is adjustable. Armrests, footrests, backrest, headrest. David, honestly, it's more comfortable than a fancy foreign car. And most importantly, electric drive. 50 kilometers without recharging. I don't envy whoever goes for a walk with you. You'll wear anyone out now. And the wheels can handle anything. Asphalt, snow, even the desert. David. Why? It's just a chair. Walk, David. Walk as much as you want. Andrew felt his hands squeezed by surprisingly strong, warm, and honest fingers. Well, are you getting used to the new machine? He nodded to David's mother, who was bewildered, disbelieving, not knowing whether to cry or laugh, but who had already shed her hopelessness and despondency somewhere. She looked at her son and openly admired him. We're waiting for everyone at Vicky's by the tree tonight. After all, New Year is coming soon. They finally gathered in the yard, by the fir tree shining with garlands, under a light snowfall. The boys, who were reluctantly torn away from a mountain of gifts, David, incredibly handsome, looking confidently ahead, obviously into the distances he would roll in his new chair. His mother, looking 20 years younger. Victoria. He had no one to compare her to, his beloved. And there was no need to. Oh, look who showed up. Not a speck of dust on him, came Barbara's inimitable, creaky voice. Well, I'll be. So our foundling turned into a prince. Who would have thought? Oh, I didn't know, or I would have nursed you myself. She headed towards the entrance, throwing over her shoulder. Vicky, tomorrow morning, make sure all the confetti papers are picked up. Take the prince out for the cleanup too, don't forget. Barbara, wait! Andrew realized, catching up with the neighbor. Wait, Barbara, this is for you. He handed the woman a rectangular envelope. What is this? She stared at Andrew suspiciously. It's a certificate for a full day at a beauty salon. Massage, manicure, hairdresser, masks, what else? Lots of things, whatever you want. But remember, you said, a whole day just for yourself, like a real woman? Well, here. Happy New Year. Barbara looked at Andrew and Vicky, at the envelope with her beautiful female desires, at the little fir tree glowing with lights, and it was unclear what was glistening on her cheeks. Perhaps snowflakes falling on them and melting from the warmth. And what did Father Frost give you? Vicky smiled. Nothing yet. He shook his head sorrowfully. He doesn't need anything but what one young woman has. She won't give it to me. Either she doesn't want to, or she can't. She can. Her voice whispered like silver. Maybe she wants to, very much. She's just shy. Everything is yours, and only for you. Take it, possess it, play and rejoice. Just don't leave it for long. Vicky and Andrew sat side by side, pressed close together, in the yard, on a bench near the tree. Complete silence reigned around them, and it seemed to them that there was no one else in the world but the two of them. However, all lovers think exactly that. Sifting down in delicate, weightless snowflakes, quiet, light snow fell from the sky. The sparkling tree shook a fluffy paw, and Andrew simultaneously felt as if a tall grandfather with a white beard would peek out from behind it, shake his staff at them, and ask sternly, "And who is giving out presents left and right here instead of me?" The snow fell quietly, making the world whiter, cleaner, and kinder. More worthy of the new year. Undoubtedly happy and bright. And I've solved your secret. Andrew's whisper sounded. Vicky purred, pressing against his side. It's very simple. If you want to be happy yourself, make someone else happy. And somewhere far away, as if agreeing with him, the New Year's chimes struck softly, resonantly, and joyfully.